Welcome to Relax and Chat, episode 45. Today I've got a really neat treat for you. We have author Paul Stansfield to chat with today. It should be a lot of fun. How you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure, sir. I do a little research lately when I have a guest coming up on the show, and I was totally fascinated to find that you are a field archaeologist. Now, that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever met one. So I was so curious immediately, what's the neatest thing that you've ever uncovered?
Well, it's probably best if I mention more than one. I was a field archaeologist for 25 years, and I worked in, I think, 24 states, mostly east of the Mississippi. But in my travels and my work, I worked on historic sites, meaning post contact with Europeans, prehistoric sites, meaning Native American, and also burials. So I'd like to discuss one of each, if that's okay. Um, so I'd say the most interesting historic site I worked on was in Buffalo, New York, and it was dated back to I think the early to mid 1800s. And of course, back in those days, they didn't have uh, indoor plumbing that connected to sewers, and they also didn't have regular trash pickup. So basically, they used their outhouses for both of those things. And so we found some of those, and obviously the odor and some of the some of the things about it are a little off-putting. But the cool thing was what was inside. There were a lot of ceramics, which helped us date the site, and a lot of bottles too. I remember in particular there was something called Dr. McMunn's elixir of opium bottles. Back in those days, drug laws were a little different. And we did take some samples from what was inside, and we discovered there were a lot of parasitic worms. So
Ooh.
letting us know the relative health of the people. So yeah, I would say that was my favorite historic site. As far as prehistoric, I worked on one in north central Pennsylvania near Mansfield, and that was a village site. A little hazy on the dates, but I think it was around 1,000 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, we found a lot of projectile points, meaning like arrowheads and spearheads,
Mhm.
and a lot of prehistoric pottery. I remember I actually personally did it was obviously a pot break, like an entire one that just broken, and so I got to excavate that. And we also found their houses. Once we scraped down, we could see the post holes, meaning where the posts that held up the walls were, and they were arranged in like a circle or an oval, and so we dug those. So yeah, that was probably my favorite prehistoric one. And then actually my favorite sites to do were burial removals. And there was one in particular in New Jersey that was a potter's field, meaning that was folks who didn't have much money or basically didn't have people that cared about them. It was mostly folks from a local prison and a tuberculosis hospital and the homeless. And I just found that fascinating. You got to really see how tough their lives were etched on their bones, basically. So like bad bone breaks. Obviously, the people from the TB hospital showed TB.
Mhm.
um, there were a few other interesting ones. Like I remember working on one where all the bones in this person's body had these weird spiral fractures. And I remember we talked to the osteologist about that later, and she mentioned, oh, yeah, according to the records, one of the guys in this area was hit by a train. So that was probably him. And there was actually a murder victim. Um, there was a guy who had been shot in the back and the side of his head, and the bullet was actually still inside his skull.
Wow.
And there was another interesting one. There was a woman who had what looked like a baseball sized round piece of bone inside her pelvis. And we spoke to the osteologist, and she mentioned that was either probably an ovarian tumor or maybe a reabsorbed fetus.
Man.
So yeah, it almost looked like a giant pearl. So that was bizarre. But yeah, a lot of my coworkers didn't really like doing burials, but I just found them endlessly interesting.
Yeah. Wow. The thought crosses my mind that you literally have no idea what you're going to uncover. It could be just about anything, couldn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I remember sometimes they had glass eyes and they were still in the skull. So like you'd uncover and be like, it's looking at me.
Oh, wow. Makes me think of like pirate times and treasure hunters. I mean, it's just, it seems when you hear the word archaeologist, you think, scientist, and you think about the reports and, things like that. It really doesn't come to mind just what it would be like to actually be out in the field doing the job. And just that little bit you shared with us, it actually is pretty cool. Like I said, you could encounter just about anything, couldn't you?
Yeah, I like to compare it to fishing in that there were often long stretches where nothing really happened and it was kind of boring. But when you did find something, or like getting a fish, yeah, it made up for it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, although I agree that the eye staring up at you would be a little spooky.
That was a little unsettling. And I
Yeah.
will say the movie Poltergeist actually got some details right in that you might remember in the movie that the whole impetus for the haunting was, they wanted to build on an area where there was a cemetery, and instead of removing the bodies, they just took away the headstones,
Wow.
and that happens in real life. so,
Wow.
I, so I guess I would just advise people if you're offended by that type of thing, and you should be, you might want to consider cremation because those kind of things do happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wow. Well, for the sake of the time, I will have to
Okay.
move on, but I want you to know I found that very fascinating. It gave me a whole new insight to what a field archaeologist is. I had no idea. And super cool. It's cool that you've had that experience. That
Yeah.
had to be quite interesting over the years. Very cool.
Yeah.
Uh, the next thing I'd like to speak about, you wrote one of the coolest stories in It's Dark in Their Minds, Horror Anthology Volume 2. And I've got to ask you, what was the inspiration for the fantastic story Wet Nightmare?
Well, I appreciate the compliments. I actually do remember. I wrote this back in the late '90s, and around that time, that's when I first started to start writing in earnest and submitting. And I thought I should beef up my knowledge of supernatural things. So my local library had some encyclopedias called Man, Myth, and Magic. And I actually just looked it up, and apparently they were published in 1970 and 95. But yeah, they had a lot of information on those things. And it really gave me a lot of good ideas. And one of those, of course, was the incubus or the succubus. And I'd heard of those, but obviously this gave a lot more detail. And I just found that very interesting. And of course, there are some creatures like werewolves and zombies and vampires, arguably overdone. So it was kind of fun to, excuse me, do a monster that maybe not as many people knew about and hadn't been reported on as much. So, and just to give a background to people who don't know what those are, these are evil spirits that sexually assault you when you're sleeping. And the incubus is the male form that attacks women, and the succubus is the female form that attacks men. And, obviously we all have to sleep and we're completely vulnerable. So I thought that was just an interesting and disturbing idea. And obviously I did my own thing with it, but I tried to keep, some of the lore, accurate.
Well, I've got to say, when I read that story, I was blown away by the creative approach that you took to the subject. Uh, I don't want to give any spoilers because that is like one of the best stories I've ever published anywhere. That's a fantastic story, and I would love the readers to enjoy it just as I did the first time I read it. Uh, wow, I love the creativity and I love the protagonist and how he can maybe do something really, really bad that you still feel sorry for him. And, the twisting of his mind and the things that happened with him. Uh, Absolutely fabulous creativity. I've got to salute you for the amazing work you did on that. And if we're talking about a short story, and it had the impact of any novel. I mean, you did a fantastic job with that story. I loved
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
it. Let's see. I need to move on for time's sake. I hate having to boogie on, but well, got to do what we got to do. I do a little bit of research on each guest just so I have some idea of who I'm speaking with. And first, I was quite impressed that you were a field archaeologist, which is freaking awesome. So imagine my shock when I found on Amazon that you have published in, get this audience, this gentleman has published in 17 anthologies. Super cool. So that tells me that you love short stories. So I'd like to ask, do you have fun when you write the short stories?
Well, kind of in a weird way, I don't know that I'd use the word fun. I do enjoy the process. I do enjoy the challenge of creating characters and plot twists and all that. I'm certainly relieved and happy afterwards, but I would say during the actual writing, it's more like a compulsion. Like I would say I don't really like to write. It's I need to write. A lot of times, just I'll get an idea, and if I don't write the story, like I get very antsy. It's sort of like a stone in my shoe, or I guess in my mind in this case.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so like I said, maybe not fun, but it's something that I just need to do.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I too enjoy both reading and writing short stories. Uh, they're a challenge in their own right. And for me, they're actually a lot of fun, both reading and writing them. I guess because I'm a 5-year-old at heart, but I just absolutely enjoy them. And many writers, particularly long form writers, novellas and novels, really struggle with putting together a story, characters and setting and pace, figuring all that out in a very limited space. You don't have 80,000 words. You've got 5,000. Did you ever struggle with that you actually have a small window for these short stories? And with 17 anthologies under your belt, you know what I'm talking about. Did you ever find it hard, or did it just come naturally and you were able to get the story together?
Basically, I kind of feel every story should be as long as it needs to be. Like if you have a briefer idea, maybe simpler, not as many characters, a simpler plot. Well, then yeah, it might be short, and then if it becomes epic and you're juggling tons of characters, then obviously it's going to have to be longer. But yeah, it is enjoyable. Like I've done some submissions for publishers that have really short word counts. Like one of them was 19 words. So of
Wow.
course that was crazy. It's like a sentence or two.
Yeah.
So you have to make every word count. And I've also done other ones. One publisher did 300 word stories. The theme was that you could fit on the back of a VHS video cassette box.
Uh-huh.
So that was fun too. Like 300 words, obviously you can go a little more deeper into characterization and stuff, but not much.
Uh-huh.
You still gotta, you gotta trim all the fat.
Yeah. I think the shortest short story that I wrote and published was about 500 words.
Okay, yeah,
And that gave me a little more room. And, the 19 words, immediately I think of Hemingway. And,
right.
and there are not a lot of Hemingways. So that's a very hard challenge.
Yeah.
But, I can work effectively at 500 words. I enjoy 3 to 5,000 words. And I do have short stories that are about 8,000 words. And each one has its appeal, though, and each one has its challenges. Do you lean more toward the very small, short 300 word side? or do you lean more toward the 5 to 8,000 word side? What do you,
Um,
as far as what you like writing?
um, the way they usually turn out, like I have very few stories that are below 1,000 words, and really not that many below 3,000. So I'd say between about 3 and 6,000 is my wheelhouse. I
Uh-huh.
do have a few on either side, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's really cool. And I believe you're the very first author, and I've met a lot of them. You're the very first author that can boldly say they've been published in 17 anthologies. That is freaking awesome.
Oh, well, I
That
appreciate
is freaking awesome. It really is. Well, I think I must move on. I have another little question I wanted to ask because you've had such a career already in the anthologies. I was just curious, have you written novellas and novels, and do you intend to?
Actually, I have, and of course, I guess first we have to determine when does a short story become a novella, and when does a novella become a novel. Like, obviously, that's not a hard and fast rule. A lot of people have their own definitions, but I guess I lean more towards a short story is below 10,000 words, and between about 10,000, maybe 75, 80 would be a novella, and then over that would be a novel. And if
Mhm.
we go by those qualifications, I've written 3 novellas and 3 novel-length stories.
Cool. And are you
And
currently working
uh,
on any works in progress at the moment?
yeah, I just recently finished it was actually a flash fiction. It was around 500 words, based on G.G. Allen. I don't know what your musical taste run to, but he was a crazy madman.
Mm.
His stage shows were legendary. Like he would usually strip naked, hit himself with the mic until he was bleeding, get in fights with the audience, and other things. If you check him out on YouTube, you probably shouldn't be eating. So he was nuts. But so yeah, that inspired that short story, very short story. And
Oh,
actually, I'll be submitting that just in a couple of weeks.
oh,
And and then I also am kicking around an idea, sort of the stone in my head, like I said, something to do with labor disputes and unions, and mixed in with the supernatural. So I hope
oh.
to get on that, and then we'll see
Yeah,
what
that
happens.
sounds like a cool combination that you don't hear of often. I love creativity that goes outside the norm. Like you said, vampires and werewolves. I love them, but there's a lot of them, you know.
Right.
Something like you just said is unique, and I like you. That's cool. Yeah. Let's see. The next segment in our little show, I really enjoy this because, I try to keep the show going. I try to keep it interesting. I try to be a good host, and I ask a handful of questions. But the audience comes to see you. They're not going to come to see me. I'm just sitting here talking. They want to know about the author, the guest. So I always give my guests an opportunity to address the audience directly and share anything you like. Any advice, any thoughts, anything you're doing in the future in your writing career, any topic. So, sir, I'd like to give you that opportunity to speak to the audience and share anything that you feel like sharing.
Okay. I guess I'd like to use this time to kind of address other authors and people who might want to become authors. And I would just, mention that, you do just have to, knuckle down, get off your butt, and actually write the story. And, instead of just thinking about it, in general, you actually have to sit down and do it. And I would also say that just like anything, if you want to become a good golfer, you play a lot of golf. If you want to play drums, you play the drums a lot. And writing is the same thing. Like the more you do, the better you get. And even the first few things you write, yeah, they might not be that great, but it's good practice. And then the next one will be better. And you just keep doing that. And I'd also like to say too that my story, Wet Nightmare, that was in this anthology, is actually a testament to being stubborn and never giving up, because I actually wrote that in 1999. So it took nearly 25 years before it was accepted. And I think think that was the 47th time. I was just looking at my my record. So yeah, basically never give up. Just keep trying. I also I'd like to mention there was a good Stephen King example where obviously he's one of the most phenomenally successful writers ever. But I remember reading that when he was starting out, he used to take his rejection slips and nail them up on the wall. And eventually he had so many that it tore the nail down. So to deal with that, he just got a big spike and hold even more rejection letters. So that's kind of what your attitude has to be. It's just like, okay, if this one rejected it, then send it to another publisher or write another story or both. Just keep trying, and you never know what's going to happen. So, and also on a practical note, there was a very helpful website. If any other authors write horror, sci-fi, and fantasy, the Horror Tree website, which is just the word. It's www.horrortree.com, and they have a lot of writing advice, and they also have a lot of publishers that are looking for submissions. And in fact, that's how I found out about RDG was on Horror Tree.
Oh.
So yeah, and I've gotten several other works published based on that. So I would definitely recommend that.
I've got to say real quick, I remember when I went on Horror Tree and I put a submission call on there, and pretty cool site. At the same time, during the same couple hours, I put the same submission call on another site that supposedly was as good. And it's so funny because, well, I was under the impression that you put your submission call on there to let people know about it. So I did that, and I went on with the other 1,000 things I need to work on every day. Well, the second site, without my permission, without contacting me at all, with no contact, they just decided, it was after the submission call had closed, probably 3 months later, they decided to announce that my press had gone out of business.
Oh no.
Like, what the hell's wrong with you? I'm not out of business, you smart ass piece. I didn't like them at all.
No, I guess not. What?
Yeah, but
What was the point of that?
Horror Tree does seem to be a very legitimate site that's well worth a visit. And I want to make one other quick comment. I hate to burn the clock, but this is worth mentioning. I rarely get to do this. 47 foolish publishers rejected Wet Nightmare. I had the sense to publish that super great story. Incredible, amazing story. I feel like the guy who accepted, what was it, Carrie by Stephen King?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like Stephen King is sort of like not so well known, and he got a lot of rejections. You're right. But then, can you imagine how happy the publisher was who published Carrie? So once more, I rarely get to do this. That I had enough in this little noggin, just enough to have the good sense to publish this gentleman's work. Wet Nightmare is a hell of a story. If you get a chance, grab the anthology. It's available on Amazon.com and on Amazon UK. You can get it in ebook and paperback. And as soon as you get the book, jump to Paul's story, Wet Nightmare. I promise you will love that story. It's freaking out. If you like horror, you'll love that story. It's amazing, sir. I say it again. Fantastic work. Fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
I hope you will submit additional stories to my press for as many years as you feel like submitting. Your work is outstanding, and I'll be very proud to publish anything that you bring to me. We'll take a look at it and go to work. Fantastic, though. That story rocks. Given the time that we have left, I have to move on. This, I'm sure the audience will be very interested in. I always ask the guests, even though I put relevant links in the description on the YouTube video, I share this across my entire platform, and a lot of the sites can't see the description that's under the YouTube video. So I ask my guests to verbally state your website or any social media that you have, so that the audience can say, "Ooh, I want to talk to Paul," and they can go there and contact you and say, "Hey, tell me about your work in progress," or whatever question they may have. So if you would, sir, please share any of that type of information that you can.
Okay, I do have a blog which I do update weekly, and that's basically just my name. It's http colon slash slash or slash slash two of them, and then my name PaulStansfield .blogspot.com. So yeah, you can check that out. A lot of my posts tend to be about weird food I've eaten. Also some sports, some movie trivia, and of course writing updates when they roll in.
Ah, sounds cool. Sounds very cool. Sir, I want you to know I'm getting a little notice from the free program that I use. We're
Okay.
about to open, but I want you to know very fascinating to learn about you and your career as a writer and your great success so far. Yeah, absolute pleasure to read Wet Nightmare. I'm going to carry on like a fool because it's that good a story. And just so much have I enjoyed this conversation. I hope that in the future, when you're releasing a new work, if you like, you can come back on the show. You have a standing invitation to do so. Um, really, really thank you for coming on and doing the show. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. This was fun. Obviously, most of our communications were via email, so it was nice to actually speak to you.
Yeah.
And thanks for having me on. And yeah, I hope more people check out the book, and I think they'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will put a link to your works down in the description too, so they can see all the different things you're published in, because that's pretty amazing.
Great. Thank
I'll
you.
make sure that link is there. Well, to the audience, I never liked this part, but I have to say that episode 45 of Relax and Chat really must come to an end. I hope you've enjoyed meeting Paul. I certainly have. It's been a blast, and I sure hope you'll come and join me for the next show. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks.